Welcome back to On the Record. Dr. Jacques Vallée is an astrophysicist who provided the inspiration for the character of the French scientist in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Vallée believes that UFOs are real, that they leave behind physical evidence, but that they don't necessarily come from outer space.
I'm talking about when I listen to the witnesses, and I try to listen very carefully to what people tell me. They are describing phenomena and objects that appear very often out of nowhere, disappear on the spot, objects that are changing shapes, objects that merge together. If the technology or the phenomenon can do that, what that tells me is that it is manipulating time and space dimensions in ways that are beyond our science. And if they can do that, they can be from anywhere, anytime. They don't have to be from a particular planet in outer space.
You've also done some exciting research on physical manifestations, other physical manifestations associated with UFOs. Describe that.
Well, what we know, I think the way we get into trouble as scientists talking about UFOs is that we mix up three different levels. There is a physical level, there is a physiological level, which is what happens to people like you and me when you get close to one of those things in a close encounter situation. And then there is a belief level, the mythological or sociological level, if you want. On the physical level, what we know today is that UFOs are a lot of energy in a small space. I've just published a book called Confrontations, in which I've gone through the basic observations of the light and the energy from UFOs. What we know is that these objects represent probably the energy of a small nuclear plant in a small volume. And it's manifested in light, in microwaves, and in pulsed microwaves. Now, we don't know a lot about what pulsed microwaves do to the human brain. So I've spent a lot of time looking at the medical effects. For example, in 1988, I spent 2 weeks in Brazil, in the interior of Brazil, from Fortaleza to the Amazon, talking to people who had seen the beams, had been injured by beams from UFOs. And there is no question that there is a lot of concentrated energy that in a form that we don't understand.
Injured how? Burned?
Not really burned. There is impact on the skin. They do describe a hot sensation, but the beam would also pin them down and push them. And we don't know how to make a beam that does that.
How many people did you talk to?
50 people in those villages, in those different isolated villages, and they describe the lights, the frequency of the light. They describe the flickering. They describe the objects, which in many cases were very, very close to them.
What do you make of the whole abduction hypothesis?
There we're going to the second level, which is the physiological and psychological level. There is no question in my mind that something has happened to those people. In other words, those are real occurrences. Those are not imaginary or purely psychological. I said before, we don't know too much about what happens to the human brain when you're in a situation where pulse microwaves are in your environment. It's possible that people who get close to a real UFO go into an altered state in which their perceptions can be manipulated. And what is critical there is to be able to retrieve the memory from those witnesses, and that memory very often is erased or is not available to them, or may be replaced by hallucinatory or delusionary material. So my problem with the whole abduction, and I'm trying to choose my words carefully here, my problem with the whole way abductions are studied is that the hypnosis, very often hypnosis is used by people who are not trained to do that. And I would caution anyone in your audience who has had an abduction experience only to seek counsel from people who are trained as clinical hypnotists or as MDs in the use of hypnosis.
But hypnosis by itself is a useful tool.
Yes, but it's not necessarily going to give you the truth. And I think you have to look at the standards for the admissibility of hypnosis in court, for example, to find what the pitfalls are, because it's very easy to influence people with your own belief. A person under hypnosis will easily pick up what your own beliefs are and what you expect them to say. And they will lead you, consciously or unconsciously, they lead the witness to say certain things. And I have a lot of trouble with that. I think it is unethical, and I think it's not going to get us to the truth.
You said it is something really is going on.
Yes.
But is it what they're describing, abducted by strange beings, that kind of a thing, or is it all psychological?
I don't think it's all psychological. The beings have been described also by people who were not abducted, in quotes, by people who were at some distance. I just spent a week in the Soviet Union talking to research groups there, especially about the Voronezh case, in which dozens of witnesses, not just kids, but also adults, have seen different kinds of beings. But there is a problem with the way those beings are described in this country. Over the last 2 or 3 years, we've been bombarded by a lot of marketing, very, very good marketing, to promote certain books and certain movies that introduce the idea that the beings were always 4 feet tall, were always bald and had big eyes. Well, that's one kind that has been described, but it's not the only kind. And many other kinds of, and it's interesting to speculate as to why the American public is being bombarded by that particular picture of an alien.
Well, why is it?
Well, maybe someone is, there are lots of games being played behind the phenomenon itself. In other words, there is a real phenomenon, but there may be, and here we're talking about the third level, the sociological level. If you could make people expect aliens, you could manipulate public opinion.
We'll come back to that in just a moment. You are something of an anomaly. I mean, a real scientist who's studying what's described as
there are a few of us. There are a few of us. Most of them stay underground because they don't want to put their jobs in jeopardy.
Would your job be in jeopardy in some sense, or in your reputation? Other scientists, if they wanted to get into this field?
The people, oddly enough, the people I work with are encouraging my work, and in many cases have sightings of their own or experiences of their own that they have not volunteered.
This is something, though, that is worthy of study by real scientists. I wonder if the day will come when more people will get into it.
I think it should be studied by scientists. I think it should be, it's a very interesting time to do this kind of research, especially because we now see that there are many different hypotheses about it. It's not just that either it doesn't exist or it has to be extraterrestrial. There are many other hypotheses. And to me, the UFO phenomenon is, I don't have a solution, but to me it's an opportunity to do some good science and perhaps to test some of our theories about physics. There are theories, for example, today in physics about the possibility of other dimensions beyond time and space. There is a theory called the string theory that speculates about 10 dimensions and not just 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time.
Does the government really care what UFO researchers do? Has the government lied about UFOs? Some thoughts on that when we return.